there is something very interesting going on with Donald Trump and his relationship to John F. Kennedy, a former United States president who was assassinated. Now, for those of you who have not seen it, there is a lot of seemingly intentional subconscious programming placed into the series Paradise along these lines. The main character is the president, who is played by James Marsden. James Marsden was John F. Kennedy in a film called The Butler from 2013. And Donald Trump had his first assassination attempt in Butler, PA. The farm was called Butler Farm. Right away, there's this association between Donald Trump's assassination attempt and Butler, where you have James Marsden playing the president in this series Paradise, and James Marsden, as the president in the series, is assassinated. And he has this jersey here at his funeral with a big 47 on it. Donald Trump obviously being the 47th United States president. James Marsden, there's the Mars in that name as well, which is evoking Elon Musk and his role in the subconscious scripted programming that is under the surface with all of these characters. And we're about to get to how Elon Musk tied into this ritual with the SpaceX rescue of the astronauts. That took place just a couple days after the last video I did that culminated on the day of the total lunar blood moon eclipse with the confirmation hearing for Dr. Oz. And Oz has that association to the JFK assassination in the same way that it's associated to 9/11, but more overtly with the fact that Lee Harvey Oswald was the alleged assassin. So you have Oz in his name, constantly evoking that idea in people's minds when they're seeing this JFK story constantly in the news, this idea of releasing these files. And in the series Paradise, James Marsden's character, the president, is struck in the head one time and he survives, like the attempted assassination of Donald Trump the first time in Butler, and then he is killed with the second strike. So the idea is potentially the series is foreshadowing a coming assassination of Donald Trump that will be successful. And if that was the case, we would see that kind of thing being foreshadowed in the subliminal subconscious programming in the news as well. And I think there's a little bit of that going on here. Now, again, this could be symbolic in terms of they're assassinating his character. He's the sacrificial lamb, the scapegoat in that way. Donald Trump, this character they have built, will be sacrificed or assassinated through his role in the larger agenda. And in many ways, depending on your perspective, that has happened. If you're on one side of the spectrum and you're thinking certain things are true, you actually believe that his character, Donald Trump, has been totally assassinated already, right? You don't need any more proof. But in the context of the larger scripting, yes, it could just mean that symbolically his character will be assassinated through this process, or it could be more overt. I don't know. I'm going to get to some of that as we go forward here, but I just wanted to remind you of where this is coming from. There are probably many more examples of this in other media, if this is a thing, but I haven't seen or been paying attention to it in that way, so I don't know if that's out there or not. Anyway, this is one clear example of that going on with the resonance to the 47 and the assassination of the president. So on top of all of that, in the context of the mini total lunar eclipse blood moon ritual on March 14th, 2025, you have the Senate confirmation hearing for Dr. Oz, putting that Oz cherry on top of the ritual that started the prior week, Friday, March 7th, when Donald Trump opened the World Club Cup trophy, which is the device from Contact, in the Oval Office. And then that following Monday, there was the X cyber attack, the shipwreck, and the stock market going into the red, which was metaphorically the American empire going into the red, the economy declining, the dollar declining. X, the Great American Eclipse, cyber attack, the whole thing was working on that level. Then they brought the Tesla outside of the White House, just like they had it during the New Year's Day ritual where the Cybertruck blew up outside of Trump's hotel in Las Vegas within hours of a ritual sacrifice outside of New Orleans, where Trump would later be for the Super Bowl ritual, where they have you go through the Stargate and then it's game over for the American empire. And then a week later after that, at the Daytona 500, Donald Trump takes this picture that is putting the idea in your mind of the ruby red slippers somewhere over the rainbow and the Wizard of Oz. Now, relating back to Paradise again, it just so happens that Julianne Nicholson, who plays kind of the main villain in the series, has a code name Sinatra. And there's even an episode titled Sinatra that is number 2 in the series, right after we are shown the assassination of the president, giving the association between Sinatra and the assassination of James Marsden, or JFK, in the context of 47 and Trump. And there is this alleged link between Sinatra and 2 of his movies with JFK's death. John Barron paces in a living room full of hostages, gun in hand. The setting is the small town of Suddenly, California. The year is 1954, and the president is about to pass through town on a train. Although the local sheriff is currently among the hostages, he challenges Barron on his plan. How is he going to assassinate the president and live to tell the tale? No one has ever done it. John Wilkes Booth certainly did it. Booth, Barron replies, "Ha, I'm no actor, busting my leg on a stage so I can yell down with the tyrants. If Booth wasn't such a ham, he might have made it." The hostages also mention the man who shot James Garfield and the would-be assassin of Franklin Roosevelt. In short, Barron isn't fazed. Nobody has ever pulled it off, but he is prepared to make history. Interesting that this character is named Barron, and of course that's Trump's son's name. The scene from Frank Sinatra's film Suddenly was chilling in 1954, but it became downright eerie 9 years later when President John F. Kennedy was murdered in Dallas. The movie, along with another Sinatra thriller, The Manchurian Candidate, was quickly swept up in the mass of conspiracy theories surrounding the assassination. According to scattered reports, Lee Harvey Oswald had watched one or both films before he shot the president. Some believed he took notes. Paradise centers around Sinatra and involves the assassination of the president. And you have this link between Sinatra and Lee Harvey Oswald, as that then relates to the assassination of John F. Kennedy, who James Marsden played in The Butler, in the context of a series that he's now playing the President of the United States who is assassinated, and is very clearly alluding to 47 and an attempted assassination before the actual successful assassination, which mirrors potentially what is going to transpire with Donald Trump. And in that context, Paradise running during his inauguration into the second term as president of the United States, Donald Trump releases the JFK files. So now everybody instantaneously is thinking in their mind and putting Donald Trump with JFK through this process. This was a major news story on Tuesday, the 18th, following the Dr. Oz confirmation hearing on that Friday. And then obviously there was the rescue of the astronauts that involved SpaceX and Elon Musk on Monday. And I'm going to get to that eventually. But first, there is this further association between JFK and Donald Trump, which is further bolstered by the fact that he nominated Robert Kennedy to be a part of his cabinet, making that association even stronger. Because this is what intentional propaganda scripted in advance is designed to do. It's designed to seed the idea in your mind so that the reality of it, when it transpires, is instantly believed in terms of the official narrative that they attach to it. On top of that, they plan approved conspiracy theories that will never lead to the truth into the event, and they disseminate those after the fact. And their assets and agents promote them and obfuscate any kind of legitimate inquiry into whatever is going on. That is always transpiring with any events on this level. 9/11 is the perfect example. It's the easiest one to point to because it's the biggest event they have ever tried, until COVID-19 anyway. There are many wars that are greater in scope and scale than something like 9/11, but I mean in particular when they're attempting to do something through the screen in an event that takes place at one time, as opposed to a drawn-out war or something along those lines. I mean, World War II was gigantic in scale. That was very audacious at the time that they attempted to script all that to transpire as well, but events like this need to be seeded in advance or the mind will reject it. It's like a body rejecting a foreign organ. It needs certain drugs to try to prevent that from happening. And in this metaphor, the drugs is the media. That is beamed into everybody's mind, and slowly it conditions the mind through this propaganda to accept the reality of what it will be shown later. Which is why almost everyone at the time of 9/11 or any similar event like that instantaneously accepts the official narrative of what transpired. Oh, that's what it was. Because they don't understand that subconsciously they had been molded to believe that thing in advance. It really seems like they are doing this with Donald Trump and the association to JFK to shape and mold the mind to accept an alleged assassination that will be shown on a computer screen or the television. In the same way that everyone accepted the attempted assassination in Butler, PA, even though there are all kinds of problems with that narrative in terms of what really transpired. But everything is so hyper-realistic now in terms of their capabilities that it is almost impossible to find any kind of evidence that would prove it one way or the other. And that's by design, right? It's always set up so it's very difficult to prove anything definitively. Anyways, on March 18th, the JFK files are released. And today, on March 21st, 2025, Trump makes some comments on the JFK files release from the Oval Office. Check out what he says here.
80,000 pages of documents is a lot to sit through. Can you just tell us who killed Kennedy?
I don't think there's anything that's earth-shattering, but you'll have to make that determination. In those, it's 80,000. It's actually 88,000, and we have some addition.
Wait, hold on a second. What did he say there?
it's 80,000. It's actually 88,000, and we have some.
Oh, really? So the JFK files release was actually 88,000 pages. Very interesting and not accidental, especially in the context that I've been going into it here, right? Donald Trump, as you should all know by now, has this association to 88 from his intentional inclusion into Back to the Future and Donnie Darko, in the way that those films subconsciously programmed the mind with the idea that Donald Trump is the twin of 9/11, because, to my point that I was just going into, that makes everything that you're viewing his character do more realistic, because your mind has been conditioned through this propaganda to accept him as the twin of 9/11. The controlled demolition of America through his two presidential terms that are those two towers, metaphorically speaking. Those films and everything else that has been symbolically placed into Donald Trump, dating back to his actual birth during a total lunar eclipse blood moon, has seeded this idea of the Great American Eclipse and the role that Donald Trump would play in that as the Moonchild. He would eclipse America, and people are just accepting this reality television show as if it is real, right? They accept the theater as if it's really transpiring, and that's a difficult thing to say because there's so much nuance there. Yes, it's like reality television in the sense that it's scripted in advance but presented as real, which many of those reality television series are. But at the same time, the actions have very real effects in the world that we all feel and experience. So it's not fake in that way, but at the same time, at the highest level, it's not real. This was all planned many, many, many decades ago, that Donald Trump would be this thing and he would do what he's doing now. In that context, he is the president who releases the 88,000 pages of the JFK files, and that is directly associating 88 with JFK, who was assassinated, and Donald Trump. This is what I'm saying. There seems to be some obvious foreshadowing to this guy is going to be assassinated, or at least we will be presented with that at some time in the future. And before going on to other stuff along those lines, Trump's Twitter rant against Lincoln Project's Morning in America ad proved our point. This is from a while ago in 2020, where Donald Trump was doing what he usually does on social media as it relates to the Lincoln Project. But look at this headline, Morning in America. What would America be in if Donald Trump, the president, was assassinated? Well, a good chunk of people would celebrate, and the other chunk would be in mourning. And indeed, if a president was assassinated, that would be the general idea presented through the news, a somber tone. This is very dangerous to the future of our country. We could experience all kinds of January 6th type reactions to this in the ways that they would present it, but understand the meaning here. The Lincoln Project, who of course was also assassinated as president of the United States. Morning in America, Lincoln Project, and Donald Trump. When you look further into the Lincoln Project, they actually announced a Showtime docuseries in 2022. I don't know if it came out or not. But the more important idea is what the Lincoln Project is. A forthcoming documentary following the members of the Super PAC amid the 2020 election and after. The 5-part docuseries explores how the Lincoln Project, the fastest growing super PAC in America made up of a veteran group of former GOP operatives and strategists, accepted the duty of saving democracy in their plot to defeat their own party's sitting president. Celebrated for their scathing ads and biting social media commentary, the series discovers that their operation is a lot more than what meets the eye, with sophisticated data analytics and voter targeting operations turning away behind the scenes. While working to accomplish their stated goal of defeating Trumpism, the group is shaken by internal upheaval, blah, blah, blah. So, the stated goal of the Lincoln Project is defeating Trump, you see? So they have associated this idea of the Lincoln Project, the Lincoln assassination, defeating Trump. Again, this is more subconscious foreshadowing, potentially. Again, it could be metaphorical, his character assassination, in the context of the larger ritual that involves the destruction of the United States of America through the presidencies of Donald Trump, which is destroying what America is seen as around the world, destroying what it used to be. And then in the future, forever changing how politics operates in America so that it is never what it once was. And in that way, it can be slowly brought down from the heights that the empire stood at for the last 200 years, but especially post-World War II. The Lincoln Project targets Trump in new ads from CBS News in June of 2020. Do you see what I'm saying here? The Lincoln Project targets Trump. And I don't have the picture up here, but you guys could find it if you want to. As a part of the Project 2025 stuff and Trump's 47th presidential campaign, there is an official Trump website that has him standing outside of the Lincoln Memorial, or at least his picture is placed right outside the Lincoln Memorial. I don't have that up, but they are making these associations. It's really interesting in terms of what might transpire in the future. Real quick, going back to the idea of Oz and Lee Harvey Oswald and Jack Ruby, which will always put that idea of the Wizard of Oz in people's minds, at least subconsciously, right? Until they're made aware of it. Oh, Jack Ruby killed Oz, the ruby slippers, and Oz, right? The Wizard of Oz. Well, in the context of all of that, on March 18th, the same day that the JFK files were released, 88,000 of them, Google acquires cybersecurity firm Wiz for $32 billion. The largest ever acquisition by Alphabet or Google. Wiz, okay, the Wizard of Oz. And remember that film, The Wiz, which included the 9/11 ritual in it. The Twin Towers, and this is the Sphere art installation, or at least it's a mock-up of it, where they are circling the sphere and relating it to the Wizard of Oz, the reveal of the man behind the curtain through this ritual, which can also be perceived as a Stargate or portal, something along those lines. Sending consciousness from one place into another. An artificial evolution, in other words. A scripted evolution. Oh, real quick before I get to the SpaceX stuff, a little bit of trivia where the movie The Dark Knight was filmed at Trump Tower, where they used the building as Wayne Enterprises, which is a very direct link to the Moonchild through Batman, right? Where those Christopher Nolan films directly relate to the sphere that is detonated in a nuclear explosion at the end of the series by Batman. This is another way of them showing you that the sphere, your consciousness, will be detonated or sent somewhere else, destroyed, through this ritual that involves the Moonchild. It's nuclear, in other words, as the DeLorean used to be powered by plutonium. A nuclear reaction was required to send it through time. to send consciousness somewhere else. And then in the context of the plot, later they orchestrate the clock tower being struck by lightning to provide that amount of energy, which has all kinds of other symbolic importance in terms of Donald Trump and just the whole 9/11 ritual in general, both what happened in 2001 and as Donald Trump relates to that through his personification of the event. But yes, clearly Donald Trump is the Dark Knight in terms of how he has been scripted into this whole thing. The Dark Knight, the hero they don't want but they need, you know, in the context of the moon, the bat signal, and all of that. There's a clip of Donald Trump saying, "I am Batman," as that related to the Matthew Perry ritual and his association with Batman, and how him dying on 10/28 was a part of this 9/11 ritual involving Donald Trump, where Stargate is released on 10/28 in 1994, and the last tower standing collapsed at 10:28 a.m. on that day in 2001. So, of course, in that context, Donald Trump in the history books will be said to have released 88,000 JFK files. And what I'm getting at is, if this is not symbolic, this could very literally be pointing towards something happening to him in the same way that it happened to JFK. That's what this is pointing to if we take it as symbolic foreshadowing. Trump's gilded New York penthouse setting for Satan's home and devil's advocate. A foreshadowing we might have heeded as books by former U.S. Attorney Berman and journalist David Enrich release, prompting the Senate DOJ investigations. This is Donald Trump's New York City penthouse, which was chosen for Satan's home on Earth in the film The Devil's Advocate. I mean, they can't really make it more obvious than that, can they? In terms of what he represents in the context of the script. Interestingly, The Devil's Advocate was released on October 17th, 1997. There's that 17 again, right? The 17 minutes between the two towers collapsing. Metaphorically, that's the space between his two terms where they really engaged in the character assassination. The only president to ever be impeached twice is then indicted for dozens of felonies. He's convicted, and it's the worst thing we've ever seen. How is this guy reelected? It's a crisis. You know, they really put that idea into your mind, and you can see how he's the personification of something like 9/11 taking place in the real world, in the way that they shaped perception of his character. That could be what all this JFK and Lincoln association is designed to evoke. It could be symbolic, a character assassination, metaphorically speaking. Or it could be pointing to the finale of this whole thing, as it were. But October 17, 1997, and this is released just a few months after Contact is released in 1997. Making contact with the devil's advocate on Earth, right? Who symbolically, through the propaganda, is Donald Trump in this context. At least as it relates to the United States of America and its future. Also, this same article, just to reiterate, notes that Trump National Golf Club in Bedminster was the original estate of automaker John DeLorean. So Donald Trump quite literally buys the house of the person who made the DeLorean that is responsible for sending consciousness through the Stargate or through the portal. Metaphorically, that's what Donald Trump is. You see, he's sending our minds and the United States itself through that portal, eclipsing it. He's the moonchild that eclipses America and our minds in that context as well. That's, of course, why, going back to the very start of his presidency, he announced Project Stargate, which involved AI and the future of that. Of course, he's at the forefront of that narrative. Of course, he's at the forefront of crypto now, which is all designed to create this digital ID, digital money environment where no one uses anything that they used to, and they are assimilated into the Borg accordingly, right? There is no freedom in that respect. Everything you do is traced and logged into the system. This is a quantum leap, you see. It's taking consciousness itself from its biological origins into something else, leaping it in terms of evolution. It will be something totally different and new in the end vision of those who are constructing this whole thing in the first place, which is the entity that is in control of this realm currently, who might be referred to as quote-unquote Satan. And you can see why Donald Trump and his penthouse would be chosen as the home of Satan on Earth, right? That's the metaphorical link to the devil's advocate in terms of the subconscious subliminal propaganda that is infused into all media. And then there's this interesting note from Trump.com. By the way, this is an official Trump website. At every Trump golf property, the American flag and Trump clocks are the first features to be placed. This is the picture on the website. You can verify this for yourself. Trump.com, media, did you know? That's the URL, okay? There's some slashes in there, but you can figure it out. Look at what time the clock is set at. Now, you could say this is 10:05 just as much as you could say this is 10:04. But we're going to take a little bit of liberty here and say that this is 10:04 p.m. that this clock is set to. If you look really close, it's not quite on the 5. It's right in between. So you have 10:04 p.m. right on Trump's website in the context of America, the lightning bolt that strikes the clock tower and sends the DeLorean through time back to the future, or through the Stargate, as it were, the atomic kid into the movie theater screen, right? All of this is taking place in the mind, which is a version of the screen in terms of how you perceive reality. Which, of course, is why the actual screens we stare at, our personal screen with, are so influential, because it is able to interact with us on a level that we don't consciously perceive fully. And indeed, that's what the sphere is. That's what they showed us via this art installation on September 11th, 2001. This is an eye. You could perceive the pupil here, and then the iris around the pupil, and you have an eye. I mean, the way the water is set up here in the fountain actually makes it look like the eye looks. Especially if it's a blue or a green or a hazel eye that you can really see the outside of the pupil until you get to the whites of the eyes. Now that I'm thinking of it, I actually had a really old blog post about this, about how the eye is so similar to how they depict black holes. Just the whole concept of the event horizon and how light reaches a point where it can't escape. And it's like, well, that's exactly what's happening in your eye, right? It's a black hole. A portal into another dimension. Symbolically, this is what they are showing the 9/11 ritual as. It's a portal into another dimension. And the twin towers are destroyed. One tower is raised in its place. And you can kind of view that as this artificial enlightenment in the way that they always talk about the third eye and that whole concept of one eye, symbolism representing some kind of evolution, some kind of state that is advanced beyond the state perceived by the two eyes. So, of course, symbolically that's taking place with this ritual, but it's also evoking the portal imagery in terms of the sphere itself being consciousness, which is what it is, but it is dropped through the portal, which is the eye, right? So they're giving you this iris pupil imagery in the same way that it's sort of done with the Egyptian stuff of Osiris and Isis and Horus, where you have the two eyes, the O's and the iris, and Horus in the form of the Wadjet is very similar to the central brain's structure. The same thing is shown in the Wiz. This is the replica scene. Hopefully you can see that more clearly now. The only difference is they have the Z for Oz here, which is the exact same thing, just said in a different way, right? What happens to Dorothy in that plot of that movie? Well, her mind is sent somewhere else through this portal that is a tornado, which kind of represents something similar to what they show you in Back to the Future or Donnie Darko or any of these other science fiction films that do a similar thing. The tornado takes her mind somewhere else, and she ends up in this whole different land that might be perceived as something entirely new that didn't exist before. This new, evolved Dorothy, right? And how interesting in that context that there's no place like home. I mean, they tell you that there is no place like where you came from, but you're drawn in by the illusion from the man behind the curtain, and eventually you discover that's what's pulling all of the strings, and that's all a part of this ritual. But the part that most people miss is that was all intentional too, showing you this artificial man behind the curtain, intentionally exposing themselves and indoctrinating you into a fake enlightenment. It's some kind of fake evolution that is perceived as progress, the natural order of things. This is what every intelligent species does. We evolve, we merge with technology. Interestingly, there are 9 of these posts and 9 of these little clusters of 3 dots. So you have 9 and 11 with the 2 towers. And then this sculpture over here is the ideogram, which was constructed and set up around the same time as the sphere. Check this out. Though the sculpture may have survived the attacks and collapse of the buildings, its steel material was indistinguishable from the ground zero rubble. As a result, the sculpture was never recovered, and its remains were removed from ground zero along with the rest of the rubble. So they put this ideogram here that looks exactly like the eventual rubble that the destroyed towers were look like, and they can't recover it because it looks so similar. In other words, they put the end result right here. These 2 towers would be destroyed and look like this. And they tell you that very clearly with the fact that they could not recover this sculpture because they look so similar. And the fact that it's called ideogram, I mean, that really gets at the idea of this being an idea in the mind, imagination, creating this quote-unquote work of art, as a German composer referred to it as. An unimaginable work of art. the portal where consciousness itself is sent somewhere else. And that is very clearly shown by Zemeckis in the follow-up to Back to the Future, which is Contact. This is very high-level sorcery. I don't know how else to describe it. Here you have Donald Trump in the Oval Office with a bunch of religious, quote-unquote, leaders that he's associated with, and they're having this prayer. They're all surrounding Donald Trump, giving him this collective, intentional energy relating to God and their version of Jesus and every way they present that story. And it's all being done with the contact device open. You see, they're sending consciousness somewhere else through these kinds of rituals. This is an energetic ritual taking place within the White House. They're showing it to you very clearly. Consciousness is dropped through the device, which is you. It's your eyes watching this. Drop through the device, and it affects you in some way. Whatever way you perceive Donald Trump, it affects you, unless you're 100% completely detached from it. And hopefully, these videos are helping you achieve that state. Your consciousness is Arrowway, right? Or Bowman. Hope you see how Arrowway is the same as Bowman. That's why I keep equating the two. And it's being dropped through the device, sent somewhere else through this ritual, which is why those films are so constantly referenced. That's why Neo is in The Devil's Advocate. Okay? He's playing the same character in The Devil's Advocate as he does in The Matrix. It's this false awakening. In The Devil's Advocate, they try to get him to create this birth that the character Satan needs in the context of the film. And in The Matrix, he's released from his quote-unquote prison only to find out that they've done that 6 times before, or whatever the number was. I don't remember exactly. Because that is precisely what is taking place right now. This kind of thing has been done to consciousness many times before. We're just in a certain iteration of it, where we can actually perceive it as it is taking place because the technology allows us to do that. That's the double-edged sword to this thing from their perspective, right? The technology is needed to create what they want to see in the world, but it allows us to figure it out, at least to a certain extent. At least as much as a human mind can perceive something that's being coordinated in a dimension that we are not capable of perceiving, right? So this is happening outside of our perceptive dimension, so we can only see the results. And that's why people have such a hard time with the idea of scripting, because they are not capable of understanding how it's being done because their mind literally cannot perceive the dimension that it's coming from. Part of this ritual is convincing your mind that it's being sent to this evolved state through everything that it's learning. But it's deception, as it always is. This was all set up to be destroyed in this ritual in the same way that it's being done to the mind right now, through Donald Trump and just everything that's going on in the world. He is personifying this event in real life. He's the twin of 9/11. And getting back to the sphere, this is directly related to the SpaceX thing, because I hope you can see how the sphere is the capsule in terms of the symbolic ritual that's taking place here. SpaceX Dragon capsule sticks splashdown, landing as NASA astronauts return home after months stuck in space. Now, the first thing to note here is that a pregnancy normally lasts about 40 weeks. That's around 280 days from the first day of your last period. It just so happens well, I don't know where it is, I have it up somewhere, that these astronauts were stuck for 286 days, right at the average for a pregnancy. So this is a birth ritual where symbolically something is being birthed out of this. And that fits perfectly within everything else that transpired from the time that Donald Trump opened the Golden Gate, as it were. When he opened that Stargate contact device in the Oval Office, everything transpired the next week leading up to the total lunar eclipse blood moon. Symbolically, he's the moon child. He's eclipsing America. He's born under a total lunar eclipse blood moon. So they give this mini ritual to help power the larger ritual where he is tasked with destroying the country itself through his actions or what they attribute to his character in that way. And then the following Monday, you have this rescue of these astronauts where the sphere, as it were, touches down after 9 months into the Gulf of America, it's called now, right? They actually had that in the news stories. It splashes down into the Gulf of America, showing you that this is a birthing ritual involving America, right? It's being birthed into something else. It's just a different way of saying the same thing. But symbolically, it all reinforces itself. And check out what they're wearing here compared to Ellie in Contact. Their outfits are very, very, very similar, with the white and the black on the sleeves. In the context of SpaceX or the Great American Eclipse, X being 88 in American Standard Code as that relates to technology and the internet and consciousness itself merging with technology. You have Ellie Arroway or Bowman in the sphere, right, from 9/11, the sphere in between the two towers, going through the portal, the pupil, being changed, evolved into something else. These astronauts are stuck for 9 months, and then the sphere is dropped into the Gulf of America, symbolically showing what is transpiring both to consciousness and the country itself. Do you see how that's happening there? And this is the patch for the crew of this mission, where they're referred to as Crew 9, and you can see they have the Dipper imagery on here, which is the exact same thing that was on Uncle Sam, quote unquote, in the Super Bowl ritual. You have the Dipper right over here. Because it's game over America, right? The sphere, the capsule is dropped from the space station, which metaphorically is what's holding the sphere in contact. The capsule is dropped, the sphere is dropped, it lands in the Gulf of America after 9 months of those astronauts being stuck there. It's a birth of something new for America. It's game over. So this happens on Monday, the rescue of these astronauts by SpaceX, where you have the X being evoked anytime something like this transpires, with everything that they wear and everything that's on the rockets, which is directly relating to the Great American Eclipse always, and also X equals 88 in American Standard Code, always associating Musk with the same idea that's associated with Donald Trump, the analemmas, the sun and the moon, the eclipse, and time in a more abstract sense, because time is different for the analemmas than it is on Earth. In that way, the moon and the sun can alter time or send you somewhere else in time, which is the whole science fiction idea behind these characters, especially Donald Trump, being associated with time travel. Sending consciousness somewhere to the point where it doesn't even perceive reality the same anymore. Time is dilated, and that's exactly what the internet has done to time. It has dilated it in a way that we perceive it differently. It has resulted in time travel, which could relate to them messing with digital time also, so that our perception changes even further, this quickening of time, where through that process we evolve into a completely new perception of reality. And ultimately, that is what this ritual is all about at the highest scale. Evolving consciousness into something that perceives reality in a completely different way. And that's lies stacked upon lies, right? That's building to that ultimate conclusion. The stack of lies is how they coordinate everything through the script that leads to that, to where we voluntarily think, yes, this is what I'm supposed to do. Or you just go with the flow of it, don't think anything of it, and you wake up one day and your whole perception has changed because you weren't aware of any of this. And ultimately, that's what the subconscious subliminal stuff is for. But anyway, X always involved in these rituals along those lines because it's all a part of the Great American Eclipse ritual, which relates to the country and the state of the world just as much as it relates to the mind. Arroway going through the sphere, having her consciousness sent somewhere else, the man behind the curtain, as it were, revealed. That's what this is showing you. The SpaceX version of it in the context of the total lunar eclipse blood moon ritual. That is just a fractal of the larger ritual that's taking place, that I was just referring to in terms of consciousness itself, merging with the internet, becoming something new. This symbolically was a birth, 9 months precisely, that the astronauts were stuck up there, then they are born into the world. They splash down in the water. Matthew Perry ritualistically dies in water under the moon. Moon associated with water and the moonchild, the Great American Eclipse. A water birth. Donald Trump eclipsing America and the mind, sending it somewhere, a quantum leap. The golden arches, the Stargates, right? The golden gate in Jerusalem. Metaphorically opening that portal, as it were. And this is all a part of it. He who saves his country does not violate any law. Elon Musk, 14 American flags in response. The 1488 and the white nationalist lore that is all tied into who Donald Trump is portrayed to be and who his followers are portrayed to be and what they will use this for in the future as it relates to other parts of this agenda that aren't directly related to what consciousness itself will become. This is more related to what we will perceive in the world around us. This is one of those real effects of the fake scripted drama that was planned, I don't even know how many years in advance. Who knows? Game over. Grand national experiment over. Flag ripped in half. Flag being lowered to half-mast. Mourning in America like that Lincoln Project Association. We cannot and will not allow platforms such as X or TikTok to destroy our democratic societies. You can see the censorship narrative building, right? This is to save democracy that these things need to be done because of what Donald Trump and Elon Musk are doing. People that don't understand the game are easily influenced by this type of thing because it makes sense to them. Look at what they're doing. I think today the news headline was that Donald Trump was attempting to remove the entire Department of Education, which, I mean, it's kind of hilarious that these are actual headlines, but you can see how someone attached to these things without understanding the larger context would view that as a doomsday type of event, you know? So they would look at a quote like this and say, yeah, we actually need to get a handle on what you can say on the internet because look at what it has resulted in. And that's the ultimate game being played, at least as it relates to speech online. But there was one more thing at the end here that I wanted to circle back around to as it related to the sphere and consciousness and Oz and the whole thing. That'll kind of really cement what's going on here, and that is related to, first, from the Wikipedia page of the sphere. After it was partially destroyed in the September 11th controlled demolition, it was dismantled and stored near a hangar at John F. Kennedy International Airport, right? So you have this association between the sphere and JFK again, and September 11th and Oz. Lee Harvey Oswald. Donald Trump, you see, is the personification of 9/11. And if 9/11 itself and the sphere in the middle has this association to JFK, that's another thing we can add to Trump's association with JFK and the potential script that is in store for him in the future. Because he's the personification of this event. He might actually be a tower that falls, quite literally. But it would work symbolically as well, because his character is doing the same thing. So again, I don't know which one it is, but it's very clearly being alluded to in all of this different stuff. The sculpture was then installed in Battery Park between 2002 and 2017. And of course, those of you familiar with 9/11 will remember that the tribute in light is staged on the roof of a parking garage in Battery Park. And here, this is an image that just shows you everything, right? You have the moon next to the two lights that are 88 total lights, making the two towers with lights. And in other words, it's the moon child and 9/11. And symbolically light, sending your consciousness through a portal, a bridge, a Stargate. The moon child is the personification of this event, reflecting absence. The devil's advocate. Contact. It's all the same thing. Just in case you didn't believe me, assembled on the roof of the Battery parking garage south of the 9/11 memorial, the twin beams reached up to 4 miles into the sky and are comprised of 88 7,000-watt xenon light bulbs positioned into two 48-foot squares, echoing the shape and orientation of the Twin Towers. And they do this every year now as a memorial to 9/11. But also note that this is Battery Park, and they actually call this park just the Battery now. So it's very literally getting that idea of Neo's passport expiring on 9/11. You know, Neo's mind and the meta cortex, the building he works at, this jump in evolution, the mind unplugged from the quote-unquote matrix, perceiving a new reality, awakening, right? The truth movement, quote-unquote, has used the matrix since it started, giving you this idea of taking the red pill and waking you up without you knowing that the entire truth movement was scripted in advance, just like 9/11 itself. And indeed, because Donald Trump was scripted to be the personification of 9/11 and the personification of all those conspiracy theories that were built into 9/11, he now is the personification of conspiracy theories as well. And so he is the representative of what it means to be a conspiracy theorist, and he has engaged in a controlled demolition of that concept as well. So you get into it thinking you're being awakened, but no, he's setting you up to be demolished. You see? The whole thing was a setup from the beginning, this fake truth awakening movement. And it's hilarious because people that are a part of it will try to say what I just said. It's like, you're a part of it. We know. You can't try to pretend that you're outside of it. We know because of who you're associated with, because your system is set up the exact same way that the mainstream system is. And you give yourselves away with your connections and who you promote. It's very simple. Anyways, this is very literally the battery where the sphere went. That's what it is, consciousness, right? It's a battery powering this illusion. And later, the sphere was eventually moved from Battery Park to Liberty Park, which overlooks the September 11th memorial. So now you can get shots of this damaged sphere right in the shadow of the One World Trade Center, getting at the idea of the sphere being consciousness itself and how it's changed now and how it was molded through this event into the One World Trade Center, metaphorically speaking, which is the needle, right? It's the continuation of the ritual through COVID-19 and everything that was designed to do in terms of the alteration of society and every way you can imagine how that changed society in these ways. You don't really have to imagine it, you live through it. At least everyone listening to this right now in 2025 did anyway. But check this out. In August 2017, the sphere was relocated to Liberty Park. On September 6, 2017, the sphere was unveiled in its permanent home overlooking the World Trade Center site. When you actually go look at the actual day that this transpired, from the Associated Press, Koenig sphere returns to ground zero. It was on August 16th, 2017, 4 days before the August 21st, 2017 path of the Great American Eclipse. There it is, right? They moved the sphere to its final resting place, overlooking where the Twin Tower Memorial is, right before the first path of the Great American Eclipse, because that's what this ritual was all about, right? The sphere, consciousness itself, sent through the device, makes contact with something new, a quantum leap for consciousness itself. It's damaged the sphere in this event, and it's eventually moved in direct correlation with the Great American Eclipse, because the sphere represents the continuation of this ritual via the personification of 9/11, or Donald Trump, who is the moonchild eclipsing America, whose 2 presidential terms were directly coordinated to be symbolically intertwined with the 2 paths of the Great American Eclipse, because that's what he is doing. So the sphere is moved right in line with the first path of the Great American Eclipse in 2017. That's when it ends up in Liberty Park, right? It's liberated consciousness in this way, in terms of their propaganda. And the continuation of the ritual through Donald Trump is then symbolically achieved.